Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of this year's DFS show on footballdiehards.com. I am your host, Jamie Calandro. You can follow me on Twitter at JAC3600. We're so excited. We're finally back. It's been 8 months of dancing around the drafts and whatnot with the combines and preseason and rookies and dynasty, and finally we get to tackle an actual week of football. I am joined by my new co-host this year. I'm super excited to have him alongside me. It's the one and only Eric Romoff at Fantasy Nav, FANTASYNAV. We're going to be doing this for you every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, breaking down the entire main slate, basically DraftKings centered, but we will throw in some stuff for the FanDuel listeners as well. So, we're going to go game by game here, but first of all, Eric, let's talk a little bit. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. I can't believe that week one is here, and that Thursday night game, although it was a little bit sloppy, definitely has me even more excited and energized to get into this full slate. We've got a 13-gamer since we are in week one, so a lot of things to break down, and it should be a fun week one in the DFS world too.
Yeah, for sure. Did you think that it was going to be such a blowout on Thursday? I think Vegas had it right with the Bills being road favorites at Rams, but they handled them. Did you see that coming?
No, I absolutely did not. I'm a bit of a sucker for a home dog as it is, so I thought it was going to be a bit closer. I was happy to take the points with the Rams, but ultimately, maybe this has to do with Sean McVay's decisions to not play any of his starters in the preseason, but with the amount of turnovers they generated in that first half, not being able to capitalize on them and be able to mount a pretty considerable lead, I think speaks to a little bit of rust. So I feel like if that same game script played out in week 10, it would be a much closer game, if not a victory for the Rams outright.
So we had, predictably the amount of overreaction and underreaction on some of the performances. Are there any of the underperforming Rams that you're worried about at all? Stafford and Allen Robinson stood out, but then there was Cam Akers also, who barely got any work, running second fiddle to Darrell Henderson. Are any of those you're legit concerned about, or is it just it's been one game, let it ride for a little while?
Yeah, I think in general, calls for patience are overdue in the fantasy world as it is. There are some things there that are of note, right? Specifically, the way that they utilize Cam Akers is a bit of a head scratcher. The thing that I try to remind myself is really twofold. One, this would be the point by which most human beings throughout the course of human history and the NFL have returned to NFL action following an Achilles rupture. So I do think it's fair to give him a little bit of an on-ramp into the speed of the NFL game. The second thing is that they did go to him specifically in that 2-minute drive to finish the first half of the game. So I think that they're still looking to him in those higher leverage situations. And I think that his sort of split with Darrell Henderson will continue to break in his favor week over week, but certainly not the way that you want to start the season for either Akers or Robinson.
No, not at all. And we had some panicking people there for a while. So, maybe we'll see something greener for the Rams on the other side. But all right, so, we're not going to talk about what games have happened already. We have a full DFS slate. I don't know about you, Eric, but I am predominantly a cash player. I pretty much put the entirety of my weekly bankroll into those double ups and 50-50s and head-to-heads. I do play some single entry and 3-entry GPPs just to get some of those stacks in that we like to do. I just put out our stack article on Football Diehards today with 3 of the games I like, and we're going to break that down. What kind of a DFS player are you predominantly?
Yeah, I am. I welcome all takers on the DFS side. In terms of kind of distribution of my bankroll, I do err more on the cash game side, either double ups or kind of small field single entries. But a lot of that is to mainly to support my habit in the GPP side, right? So I have far more money invested in those single entry double ups, but I also like to take a number of shots at generally about 20 max is the largest multiplier that I'll go into, but definitely like to mix it up and go after some of those big paydays as well as the steady returns of the cash game streets.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I don't, unless I get a free ticket, I don't generally tend to play those big millionaire things. I mean, as nice it would be to win $1 million in an afternoon. It's just such a top heavy thing, and
It's
you
not
gotta
happening, yeah.
you're not gonna do it. You gotta strike gold on everything, and I just don't have that kind of luck in me. So, all right, we're gonna start breaking down game by game here. Before we do, there's a couple of questions in the YouTube chat I think we can get to real quick before we go. So we're looking at CTQAP asks for a Kittle replacement if he doesn't play. I haven't seen if he's actually not playing yet officially. I think he's still questionable, but for a Kittle replacement, Everett, Njoku, Hurst, Hunter Henry, or Evan Engram in half point. You got to lean on any of those guys?
Yeah, it's tough. For what it's worth, I think it's probably less likely that Kittle suits up this week, suffering that injury late into the season, late into the week, I should say. For me, there are really two names to consider there, Njoku and Evan Engram. Jacoby Brissette, in the instances where he's been a starter, has favored the tight end more than any other position. So I tend to lean on the side of David Njoku here in this week 1 matchup. I do think Everett offers some interesting upside. We just have to see if he can, and I'm sorry, Jamie, as a Giants fan, we have to see if he can actually squeeze the ball and haul it in. If he starts doing that in Jacksonville, I do think that he offers some interesting upside for the rest of the year.
I'm going to throw something if I see him catching the ball in Jacksonville.
Right?
I mean, it's the same size. Like, yep. Yeah, no, I'm with you here. Njoku would be my lean there. The Cleveland is always favored the tight end. Jacoby Brissette should be known to do that as well. They just signed him to the extension. He doesn't have Austin Hooper anymore. That would be the way I would go, but I wouldn't disagree with Everett or Engram on that either. So in the last one, before we get started on the games, we have Robert Ferenc. I hope I'm saying your name right. In cash game lineups, do you usually stack a QB and wide receiver or tight end or a running back and defense? I mean, we're going to find some instances to do both in this show. I think, in general, either one is a good stack for me. I have found that people tend to ride the single stacks with a bring back, so you're getting a little more leverage even doing the same game with double wide receivers or even triple. We saw a couple millionaires one last year with Roethlisberger and like 3+ receivers. So I think he can do either one there, and I got a good running back defense one coming in this show for an offense I like. Anything you want to add there? Oh, if you're talking about cash, Robert, yeah, you don't have to stack in cash. Stacking is generally a GPP play because you're kind of going for the upside of one game. I mean, I have no problem in cash games if you're playing a quarterback to put his wide receiver or his tight end in there, or if you have a running back to put their defense. But I don't go out of my way to squeeze that into cash. I just play the floor plays at everything. Eric, what about you on that?
Yeah, I've got a similar point of view. Like as a general rule, I try to avoid stacking in cash, but the way you put it is really spot on, right? It's more so that stacking isn't central to the strategy of an effective cash game build as it is in the GPP side. So if you have guys that are returning value and they happen to play for the same team, that's fine, but certainly don't head into your build trying to identify where you want to stack particular teams.
Yep, totally agree. So, on that note, thanks for the questions. Keep them coming. On that note, we're going to get right into it here. So, we're going to, rather than do the 1 p.m. and the 4 p.m. games, we're going to kind of go game by game, highlight. We'll start with some of the ones that should be a little bit more popular on this slate and that we are attacking more often than not, and kind of delve into all of them a little bit just to see if there are some diamonds in the rough there. And we'll hit them from a cash and GPP perspective. So the first one on the board is an exciting 4 p.m. one. We've got the Las Vegas Raiders with some new looks on offense, and the Los Angeles Chargers, who have added some stuff on defense and have really rounded out their team. I think they're looking to be a Super Bowl contender this year. The Raiders are fun with adding Devontae Adams in their space as well, and with a healthy Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. So I'll let you kick this one off, because we had talked offline before this, and you said you're really on this game. So what is it? What are you looking at in this game from a DFS perspective?
Yeah, there's really two things at play that have me keen on this game. One is the point total, right? We're looking at a 52.5 total. It's gone up a point since it opened at 51.5. So should be one of the more potent scoring environments on the week. The second thing, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the game, I'm actually a bit more bearish on what is currently the highest point total game on the slate, the Kansas City and Arizona tilt. So with that, I really like the leverage of getting over to the second game on the board, and there's just a number of pieces across both of these teams that feel like they're a little bit underpriced, which is kind of par for the course in week one. But there are interesting ways that you can compile these players. Justin Herbert comes in at 7,600. He's the second most expensive quarterback on the board. I do think he'll be a fairly popular option, because while he's all the way up near the top of the list, not exactly an unreasonable price tag. I think he's got a pretty good line of sight to returning value at $7,600. Austin Eckler checking in at the running back position of the Chargers side might be the one that I'm a bit more interested in fading right now. He's a little bit more expensive. There are just a couple of guys around that 8K, 8.5K range that I like a little bit more. And I really want to attack the defensive secondary for the Las Vegas Raiders, right? We should see Keenan Allen facing off against Hobbs in the slot. Hobbs allowed catches on like 85% of his targets last year. So we could have a really nice sort of perfect cash game type of outing for Keenan Allen, where he's just stacking up volume. Rock Ya-Sin, the matchup for Mike Williams on the outside, fairly middle of the road corner. I do think that with the size speed combination of Williams, he can certainly take advantage of that. I'm not quite sure if there's going to be enough volume going around to where I'd want to consider Josh Palmer quite yet. In those GPPs, those limited exposures that I mentioned at the top, I will be rotating some Palmer into my player pool, but really looking to find ways to get to Justin Herbert and a combination of Keenan Allen and or Mike Williams in this tilt against the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm with you for sure, and I wrote this up in the article today, and I really like Mike Williams. I don't think Rock Ya-Sin stands a chance against him, they also have Jonathan Abram at safety, who is simply awful in coverage. They did add Chandler Jones to their pass rush, and they still have Max Crosby, so that's a really, really strong edge rush on both sides. But I mean, this Chargers offensive line is just so good. I don't think that they're going to be able to disrupt this offense as much as they would like to. And I'm with you. I love the double stack of Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. I think if I had to pick one, I'm leaning Mike Williams. I think I'm doing that for the season too. I mean, Keenan Allen was being drafted with a higher ADP, but I'm a big fan of Mike Williams this year. I think that with Keenan Allen's age and his yards per route run and his average depth of target dipping every year, I think we're going to start to see that shift into Williams as their actual wide receiver one this year. So on the Raiders side, we have an interesting one too. There's a lot to like about the Raiders offense simply because Devontae Adams is there. I think with J.C. Jackson out, there's really not much for the Chargers to do to stop him, outside of the fact that they have an equally good pass rush in Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and the Raiders' offensive line is terrible. So do you think that that's going to affect Adams negatively? Do you think that he has the chance to be an overall wide receiver one this week? And what about the rest of the Raiders' offense?
Yeah, I think that Adams can get there, right? We think about them going out and getting him in the offseason. We think about the ways that we've seen Josh McDaniels utilize kind of X or alpha wide receivers historically in New England. So I think he should see plenty of opportunity. The matchup against Asante Samuel Jr., you know, I like this kid as kind of a prospect, but he is very young in his NFL career. I think he can be exploited by Adams. Your pass rush point is perfectly fair. So that generally has me looking towards kind of those faster, short and intermediate distant routes to account for a looming pass rush. So could be a point where we see a bit more Darren Waller, where we see a bit more Hunter Renfrow than maybe they would originally draw up in their game plan. And specifically looking at Waller, I mean, $5,400, that is a very moderate price tag for a guy that has the upside to be tight end one any given week. Week one of last year, if I need to remind anybody, was the game where he saw 19 targets and absolutely exploded. I believe it was on Sunday Night Football. So certainly could see a repeat effort in week one of this year. Maybe not quite 19 targets, but should be heavily involved and offers pretty solid value at 5.5K essentially.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's coming in on football on our ownerships. He's coming in as the third highest rostered tight end. That price tag, I think you're right, is a little bit off for his skill set and his ranking among the tight ends. Considering he's well priced below Travis Kelsey and Mark Andrews here, and he's below Kyle Pitts as well. Oh, and Kittle, who is questionable. I think of the two guys you mentioned, I prefer Renfrow to him, just simply because it's a tough matchup for Waller with Derwin James at safety, and they have Kenneth Murray at linebacker and Drew Tranquill at linebacker. But like you said, I mean, he's a super athletic tight end. I think if there's any pass protection problems, that works in Renfro's favor out of the slot. He's one of those like Keenan Allen type guys who is a low average depth of target route runner, but as a high catch percentage that in the PPR format. But I don't really think you can go wrong with any of these guys. Are you gonna? Last question, kind of. Well, we got to get to the running game here too. Are you stacking the Raiders at all, or are you kind of content in this game to stack the Chargers and just use a Raider as like the bring back option here?
Yeah, in terms of the builds that I target this game in GPP with. I'll primarily be looking at the Raiders as the bring back piece, but I do like to build kind of a kind of alternate universe player pool on the games that I'm heavily exposed to. Right, as I'm putting together my lineup, I'm telling myself where I can identify correlation in certain outcomes, and what is the narrative that needs to happen for this outcome to hit. I do like to mix it up on the opposite side of that and say, if everything I'm planning for goes wrong, what does that game look like, and try to account for some pieces. So that's the circumstance by which I'll probably have some Derek Carr, most likely single stacks with Charger bring back. But ultimately, I'll have far more builds where I'm looking at a single Raiders piece on the bring back.
Yeah, I think that's the way I'm leaning to. There's just so many ways to go with that Chargers game, and I do think that their offense is gonna outshine the other one in this game. So last point before we move on to the next one. Do you have any interest in the Raiders running game? It got a little bit muddy there. I mean, it was looking like Josh Jacobs was kind of primed for a breakout there when it looked like Kenyon Drake was on his way out the door, but now they added Brandon Bolden and Amir Abdullah. They drafted Zamir White. They declined Josh Jacobs' fifth-year option. So, I mean, what are we doing with this running game here?
Yeah, I mean, practically speaking, it's an avoid for me in week one, right? The way that they have approached his contract, the way that they utilized him throughout the course of the preseason, doesn't exactly denote someone that is in or a front office that's incredibly confident in this player. So just a very big question mark in terms of how he'll be utilized. And then from a strategy standpoint, I mean, him sitting at 6.3K, he's kind of in this kind of upper middle tier of running backs where I think there are several other options that I would much prefer to roster. Really, the only circumstance by which I would find myself clicking the button on Josh Jacobs is if I am mass multi-entering a very large field tournament, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see him land, 3, maybe even 2% or lower in terms of his rostership. So he has historically been the lead back in this offense. If that ends up being the case in week 1, you will find yourself with a lot of leverage in a high-scoring game, but that is much more of a very large field GPP consideration for me.
Yeah, I like that point. I would tend to agree. And looking at the football diehards ownerships here, we do have, you're kind of right on the money there. It's looking like Josh Jacobs is coming in at about 3% owned, which is not even in the top 20. So you're right. In the large field GPPs, I think people will focus on the passing game, as they rightfully should in this one. And Josh Jacobs will kind of be an afterthought. And theoretically, he should be the lead back, at least right off the bat. But we'll have to see kind of how that plays out. So any final thoughts on this game, or should we move on to the other one, which I'm very interested to get your take on?
Yeah, I think we really touched it, right? The thing I'll say again is that I like this game as a way to get leverage on the field off of the game that we're about to talk about. So that is going to be a lane that I will step into and drive down all day tomorrow, and hopeful that it works out well.
All right, awesome. So as we move on, so the next one on the board is the highest total of the game, which you mentioned. I'm going to kind of kick off the positives here, and I want to get your take on where it is you're fading and why. So we got the Chiefs at the Cardinals in Arizona. We got a 54-point total on this, unless it's changed in the last couple of hours. A new look Chiefs offense. So there are some things that I definitely like on here. Even with Tyreek Hill gone, we've got some values on the board. Travis Kelsey at 6,600. We're betting on the age not getting him again. He was the tight end 2 last year behind only Mark Andrews, and was tight end 1 overall for 5 years before that. So he doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. That does come with the possibility that the defense keys on him a little more without Tyreek Hill to worry about, which is, I guess, a concern. But other than that, I mean, he's 6,600, which is way too low for him. I do like Juju Smith-Schuster out of the slot at 5,200. He's not priced, I don't think, to be Patrick Mahomes' receiver. I think he's priced as, dead arm Ben Roethlisberger's receiver there, playing behind Deontay Johnson. So I really do like him as a value. I think you can play him in cash. Just kind of double checking his rostership as we go along here, and it's looking like it's pretty high. Yep, he's 9th owned at 11%. I think that would warrant a GPP fade for me, possibly in favor of other Chiefs receivers, but I'll kind of let you take that one. And then we have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Mecole Hardman, and the rookie Sky Moore, who we really don't know what their roles or their, or how they're going to be featured in this offense. So I think if you're stacking this game, you want to focus on the main guys and maybe take some shots with those under-owned guys in multi-entry. In a single entry, I think I'm kind of with you, and I'm fading this game for a couple of other ones that I like a little bit better for that format. But what am I missing? What are you not liking about this game? Anything that does stand out to you as the positives? Let's hear it.
Yeah, look, I don't think that that this game is going to be a dumpster fire and should be outright avoided, right? When I say that I'm fading it, I mean that I intend to have less exposure to this game than I anticipate the DFS market will when lineups lock tomorrow. But overall, there are definitely pieces that I will have in my player pool. Really, the kind of theme that drove me to this position is one, this is coming in as the highest point total that typically, ends up finding a lot of rostership. But I don't think that they're actually going to get to that total. I think that they're going to come in under by a fair amount. I'm pretty confident in the Chiefs' ability to sort of hold up their end of the scoring bargain, but I don't quite think that Arizona can keep pace with them with just all of the injuries or kind of availability issues within their receiving core, right? We know that DeAndre Hopkins is out. Rondell Moore has been scratched. Zach Ertz is either going to be out or be on a potential pitch count. So, the thing about the Cardinals down the stretch run last year and seemingly every year when they kind of peter off, it's typically the point where they get a little bit one-dimensional, and I have concerns that will be the case tomorrow. So I don't see as many points going up on the board tomorrow afternoon as it feels like Las Vegas seems to indicate. So that kind of has me walking back my exposure. And then the second thing, Travis Kelsey has absolutely no business being priced at what he is. I mean, $6,600 is thievery. So I expect him to be very popular. I wouldn't be surprised if he is pushing north of 25%, even sitting all the way down at 6.6K. And he has kind of a rough matchup, right? We think about, what they do with Isaiah Simmons, one of these sort of hybrid safety linebackers. And Arizona was very difficult against the tight end last year, right? They offered the second fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So I think there's going to be a huge cluster of ownership on Travis Kelsey, and he is in maybe one of the worst matchups that he will see all year. So easy fade for me. Generally speaking, especially in those GPPs, I'm going to try to get leverage on the field by looking at some of the kind of afterthought pieces here, right? I do like Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in around that 5.5K range. There are a lot of other options sitting right around there, so I wouldn't be surprised at all to free low owned a way to get into this game, to get into the Kansas City side and following my narrative, a Kansas City victory kind of running away. Definitely like the lead back in that situation. The build where I will be stacking around this game, I'm going to be looking at taking advantage of the wide receiver core. Juju's a little bit chalky for my like, but I think you can get different if you double stack a Patrick Mahomes with Juju and CEH, with Juju and Mecole Hardman. You can definitely get some leverage on the field by how you construct your roster. On the Arizona side, if you want to fire up Kyler, that's fine. I do think he has a clear stacking partner in Marquise Brown, but those are really the only two pieces from Arizona that I'm looking to get in my pool tomorrow.
Yeah, Marquise Brown, a couple of things on the Arizona wide receiver core. I had Rondale Moore in my placeholder at 4,000, and I was super excited about it. So when that hamstring injury hit, I mean, things had to pivot. I had 3 running backs around him, the receivers I liked, and now, that value goes away. And Marquise Brown is starting to look like a potential cash must at 6,200. He's also currently the highest rostered player on DraftKings and on FanDuel at wide receiver. So he's going to be very, very, very popular tomorrow, and rightfully so. I mean, he could be a target monster. He could be an air yards monster against this team. You expect the Cardinals, I think they're going to lose. So, the Chiefs are 6-point favorites on the road. I know it's in Arizona. And I think you're spot on, by the way, about the Kelsey thing. The Arizona used to be a team you attacked with tight ends, and they fixed that completely in the last couple of years, particularly with Isaiah Simmons, like you mentioned. So I am looking at Marquise Brown in cash for sure. I don't hate AJ Green. I know that's gross to say, but it's the beginning of the season. He doesn't have that wear and tear on him yet that we expect is going to happen. What is he? He's 30, 34, 35 even. And he's cheap. So I think, with Moore out and DeAndre Hopkins suspended and the tight end situation that you mentioned, that Green can pay off some value tomorrow. I don't think he's a safe cash play, but I don't mind double stacking him with Kyler and Marquise Brown for sure in this one. And I like the point you brought up on Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well, especially with J.J. Watt being questionable. The Cardinals ruled out Trayvon Mullen, which only helps the Chiefs' offense, and I think it adds to CEH's upside a lot. So one more point on this game. What's your thought on James Conner? He kind of looks like another one where the focus is on the passing game. Do you think the same kind of path you said with Josh Jacobs, or is he more, someone you got a lot more confidence in?
I mean, certainly more confidence than I have in Josh Jacobs, but there is a very long list of NFL running backs that I have more confidence in than Josh Jacobs in Week 1. So not exactly high regards. I think the struggle for me with James Conner is just how much of his scoring came by way of the touchdown, and how I think that this game script is going to find the Cardinals passing far more often than they are rushing. Last year, by all statistical accounts, was somewhat of an anomaly in terms of how often he found the end zone, but specifically in this Cliff Kingsbury offense, right? It has historically been one where they get in close, and Kyler Murray is frequently using his legs to either get somebody open into the back of the end zone or to run it in himself. And a lot of those opportunities ended up going James Conner's way last year, and I don't see that repeating in 2022. So, there are a lot of things sort of working against Conner. I do think that he's got a very safe volume floor, right? So if you're looking to maybe get a little bit different, get into this high scoring affair in single entry or even in cash games, there are certainly worse plays that you can trot out there than James Conner, just given how he's got a stranglehold on the rushing work in Arizona.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't think there's anything wrong with him at all. My biggest issue with him is there some similarly priced running backs like Mixon and Swift and Aaron Jones, who I'm crazy about this week, that I just like more. Like if he's a comeback for a Chiefs stack, okay, but I'm not going out of my way to play Conner this week, even though I do think that with his volume and his workload, he could be one of the better scoring running backs if the game script goes that way. But I'm with you. I think they're going to be passing a lot more in this game, and that his TD equity should decrease. So I think we're kind of on a similar page with this one. So let's move on. These are kind of the two obvious ones, and I don't know about you. There's another one that's on my radar for sure this week, and that's the Eagles and the Lions. So I'm gonna start this one off. Jalen Hurts is my overall QB1 this week. I don't think I can get away from him as my cash quarterback. If you look at what Detroit is and what they did last year, they gave up the most fantasy points per game to running backs last year. Jalen Hurts, in essence, is a cheat code as far as a quarterback goes, like Lamar Jackson, where he is another running back on top of that. They lost Romeo Okwara, their top edge rusher, to the PUP with an Achilles injury. The Eagles have a nice little 27-point team total, and now adding A.J. Brown to this mix, they've really opened up that offense a lot more. That even if they aren't the highest rushing team as they were a year ago, they can really balance this out and be a lot more efficient in both parts of the game as well. So, I think with the Eagles' offensive line, which could be the best in the NFL this year, Jalen Hurts is just looking like a smash play to me. So he's going to be my cash quarterback. Unless someone talks me in, if I have extra money and someone talks me into one of these higher ones like Herbert or Lamar Jackson, I can't see going away from him at 6,800. So are you with me on Hurts, or is there someone else you're looking at more potentially as a cash quarterback? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I definitely think Hurts makes a lot of sense as a cash quarterback. The environment is absolutely tailor-made for him, right? You mentioned how forgiving this Lions defense was against opposing rushers last year. They were also the ninth most favorable matchup for opposing quarterbacks, right? So a lot of things working in favor for Jalen Hurts beyond the fact that they have a fantastic line to protect him, that they've added offensive weapons around him. So definitely feels like one of the more safer plays. There is one other guy at the quarterback position that I'll probably split my exposure to in my cash game build specifically. You mentioned him, that's Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about him a bit more. But overall, I do like this game to score up a lot. I also think it's going to be one of the more popular games. I've been sort of working the Hard Knocks bump into my analysis here for Week 1, just given how much Dan Campbell's odds for Coach of the Year have increased since Hard Knocks came out, and how the over on their win total was getting bought up, right? So I think that there's going to be a lot more public attention on this game than a typical Eagles Lions game would have. So with that, I'm going to find my way into it, but maybe not quite as heavy as the rest of the field.
Yeah, and there's a couple of ways I'm going with this game too. I mean, first of all, you mentioned that Detroit was kind of a revolving door to quarterbacks as well. So I do think a passing stack is warranted here with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert. This is one of the ones where I wrote about this too, and I always like to find in some of these popular games just some leverage ways to build them. And this is one that I'm kind of basing stuff on last year's successes for the Eagles and failures for the Lions. And this is kind of harkening back to a question before about, if you stack the quarterback with a wide receiver or running back with a defense. This is one where I think you can get a very unique build with the Eagles offense that has upside. And what that is Jalen Hurts with Miles Sanders and the Philadelphia defense and no bring back with the Detroit, which is immediately going to be different from anybody else that's stacking this game. Philadelphia led the league in rushing attempts last year. Detroit gave up the most fantasy points per game to running backs. I think with the Eagles being 5-point favorites, that game script favors something like this. Again, I don't like using Miles Sanders in general because he's always hurt and he's disappointed. And people are calling for Kenneth Gainwell to kind of take over for him, and he could have a role too. But I really like them to impose their will on the ground, and I think the upside for Hurts to rush in 2 touchdowns and Sanders to rush in 1 or 2 himself is there. So I'm going to be doing builds in that.
I mean, you're definitely correct in saying that is a very unique build, right? That's probably like a 1% type of construction. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I can bring myself to click the button on Miles Sanders, but if I'm looking at multi-entering a very large field tournament, I think there's credence to that argument, and I like your line of thinking. The thing for me that's really at play is twofold, right? Like with these wide receivers, they have such beautiful matchups on the outside, right? You look at them lining up against Okudah and Awarie. I mean, these are defensive backs that they should be able to absolutely expose in tomorrow's game. So I'm probably looking at more of a traditional stack with regard to that. But the instances where I'm going to build around this game in particular, I'm definitely looking to double stack with one of the outside pieces. I kind of like running it back with Dallas Goedert on the Philadelphia side, but then flipping it right over and trying to get unique with the 2 tight end build and trotting out TJ Hawkinson on the Detroit side. Philadelphia was the most favorable matchup for opposing tight ends last season, and their coverage on the outside, while they are getting a little bit longer in the tooth, Darius Slay and Bradbury, still very, very capable defensive backs at the NFL level. I do think we see much more of the passing work going the way of Hawkinson and even Swift out of the backfield. So I'm in lockstep with you in terms of trying to find a unique way to attack and get exposure to this game. I kind of like the 2 tight end approach, specifically in the context of the matchups that they carry.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% with you on Hawkinson there too. They give up the most fantasy points per game to tight end, and their defensive scheme is just built that way. They give it up over the middle and in the slot. And what's that? What was that?
They just let them do it.
Yeah, right. And they shut down the perimeter, and that's what they're known for, and that's what's been working for them. And that, I'm sure, with adding James Bradbury, is what they're continue to do with Slay on the other side. So I am not really too interested in DJ Chark or Josh Reynolds or anybody that else is going to trot out on the perimeter. I think I'm with you that Hawkinson is the guy that I want to take advantage of the Eagles with if you're bringing back one. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is similar. He played over 60% of his snaps in the slot last year. But I think we know Hawkinson, how his routes will go. So I think he is a touch safer per price point and will be less popular, with that double tight end thing if you want to get that leverage in GPP. So yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of on the same page here with this game. So we're going to kind of go on here. These I think these I think are the three that kind of stand out to us with, as far as popularity and upside and ways to exploit different things. But, in the next half hour or so, we'll try and really touch on a little bit of every other one. So I'm going to kind of skip to a different one first, and we're going to go to Indianapolis at Houston because we do have a question in the chat right here that says, I'm sure you'll get to him. This is from Mr. Scampers. Welcome. Thanks for your question. I'm sure you'll get to him, but what are your approaches to extreme value, high rostered players like week 1 Damien Pierce? And this is a good question because the Texans, Damien Pierce, the beauty of week 1 sometimes in DFS is we really get a chance to exploit low price points simply because the sites release it so far in advance. So sometimes you're going to get like these $3,000, $4,000 players that are just, were an afterthought when these are released, and all of a sudden are finding themselves in starting roles or whatever. So I'll let you kind of try and kick this off first. Marlon Mack has been cut. Damien Pierce is the starting running back. He's a 4th-round draft pick, playing for a suspect offense. So what's your approach to him this week in DFS?
Yeah, I'm not afraid at all to fire up Damien Pierce, especially in a cash game context, right? He's coming in sub 5K, and he should have the vast majority of the workload for this Texans offense really all to himself, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he is one of the chalkier running backs on the board here in week number 1. But in a cash game, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, right? You're targeting 12 or so points out of him to get pretty close to value. And, with the volume that he should see with this scheme that the Texans run, right? Pep Hamilton very much so wants to establish the run. They want to try to shorten these games. They're going to continue to go to Damien Pierce. He can catch the ball effectively. He can pass block effectively. In the preseason, they used him in really high leverage situations at the goal line and on 3rd down. So I do think that he's got a very high likelihood to return value on his price tag. So for a cash game, happy to jump all over that.
I agree. And he wasn't in my original cash lineup because I was kind of set with that cheap 3rd receiver. He is now because I'm trying to squeeze in Marquis Brown, who's costing me a lot more than Rondale Moore did. So sacrifices have to be made, and Damien Pierce is starting to find his way in there, and I'm perfectly fine with that. There's not a lot he can do to hurt you in cash at 4,800, especially if he comes in with significant rostership. I think fading him in GPPs is perfectly fine. If he's going to be popular, especially if you think that the Texans are going to be playing from behind and that Rex Burkhead is going to be the one that benefits from that. I think that's definitely a pretty savvy fade. Is there anyone else on Houston you're interested in while we're on this game?
Yeah, I'm happy to roster Brandon Cooks specifically in cash games or in single entry GPPs, right? This is a guy that is routinely over 100 targets, routinely over 1,000 yards. He should very much so be the focal point of this Texans passing offense. And you couple that with Nico Collins is very likely to see Stephon Gilmore lining up against him. So, with Brandon Faison being the more likely matchup for Cooks, should be able to pick right up where he left off from last season and see a heavy dose of volume and a high number of catches. So love those type of players in a cash game context.
Cooks is 28. I feel like he's like 50. Doesn't it feel like he's been around since like the 90s?
I say this every year. Brandon Cooks is my candidate for the how is he this young player in the NFL every single season. Like I feel like there's like grainy black and white footage of Brandon Cooks running around out there. Somehow he's
it's incredible. It's incredible. I cannot believe he's not yet 30 years old. I think I'm with you that Pierce and Cooks in a cash setting is perfectly fine. On the other side of the board, we talked about mispricings. Michael Pittman, I don't know who priced him this year. $5,500 for him. I mean, he is someone that a lot of people in the fantasy space have as a top 10 receiver this year. I don't see that is a silly take at all. He had an 85% catch rate last year, and they're probably going to start either Derek Stingley against him, who has not played an NFL down yet, or Steven Nelson, who is not good. So, I mean, Pittman is as close to a lock in cash games as there is for me at 5,500. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, right there in lockstep, right? Pittman should be contending with Marquise Brown for the most popular player on DFS boards tomorrow, and with just cause. If the theme hasn't shown through quite yet, I'm a big fan of trying to attack either young, inexperienced, or rookie defensive secondary players. So definitely like the matchup for Pittman against Stingley in his first NFL game. Sticking real quickly on this Indianapolis side, if we're looking for a punt play, or if you're looking for a way to get different and maybe try to get some leverage off of Pittman, this never feels fun to say. But Paris Campbell's all the way down at 3.3K. He's going to see a lot of Desmond King as the slot corner, who, like many of the Texans players, isn't really all that good. So if you're looking to punt and save some salary, if you're looking to leverage off of the high rostership of Michael Pittman, do think it's fair to throw some GPP darts Paris Campbell's way, even though he always seems to let us down.
Yeah, no, I like it. Desmond King is slow. He's shown that. So I think out of the slot that's a nice PPR play. So real quick on this game before we move on to a couple of others, where are you on Jonathan Taylor? I mean, I feel like that's the elephant in the room with the Colts. So are you where does he fit in for you this week?
Yeah, I'll certainly have shares of Jonathan Taylor. I'll probably be a little bit underweight relative to the field, right? I think as we sit now, he's another one of those guys that's going to be right in the mix for the most popular player. 9.1K, for what Jonathan Taylor is actually a really solid value overall. I think we're going to get to a point where we're paying close to or over 10K for him on any given Sunday. So, points per dollar feels like a really good fit. But he is kind of in this weird no man's land, right? Like if we think about the running backs on the board, I mean, he's a good $500 more expensive than some very prolific rushers, right? So maybe that stands to drive his rostership down just a little bit. Happy to fire him up in cash games and in single entry. I probably won't have a lot of him in GPP just because I'm not going to be building around this game all that often. But the cases where I am, Jonathan Taylor is likely to be a big part of that construction.
I agree. I think his ownership or his rostership, excuse me, is one that we want to really watch as it goes along here because I mean everything is set up for him. There's 7-point favorites on the road. He destroyed the Texans last season in the two meetings. He had 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards rushing in the 2 games against the Texans last year. So, I mean, there's really no reason he shouldn't smash. I feel like I want to like him more. It's just that there are such good running backs that are cheaper, and I'm able to balance out my roster a little bit better without him. So, I mean, that's one I'll kind of take a look at as we go along. I think right up until game time hits. All right, so moving right along here, we've got one that you said that you were into this week, and I'll kind of let you take this one. We've got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Washington Commanders, which is going to take me a while to get. I want them to be the football team still. So we got a 45 or 44 over under. We got a 2-point spread. Washington favorite at home. What's your take on this game?
Yeah, I thought the football team was kind of like a cool, kitschy little name for them. So I'll be slow on the take, getting used to the Commanders label. Really, the reason why I like this game are a lot of the things that you already highlighted. A decent point total, right, kind of flirting around 44 or 45. A game that should be close throughout, and 2 teams that allowed their opposing offenses last year to score at a pretty prolific rate, right? It certainly helps that Chase Young is not available and on the board for the Commanders. That definitely gives a little boost to everybody trotting out there from Jacksonville. But I think the thing that I like most about this circumstance is just about everybody is underpriced. You look at where ETN's coming in; he's in that very low end of the starting range price tag for running backs. You look at where Christian Kirk comes in, Antonio Gibson. Jahan Dotson is basically free, right? Terry McLaurin is underpriced. Just there's a lot of value from a points per dollar standpoint, and specifically why I'll probably have be a bit overexposed to this game is I don't think the public is really going to be on it all that much, right? There's not a whole lot that's exciting about a Week 1 matchup between the Commanders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if that's the case, I'm probably going to be looking at this game in specific as kind of my secondary target to go with my Charger stacks or to go with my KC stacks as I'm rounding out my builds.
There's 11 current again. So some people
Yeah, and it's an interesting one too because I think you're right. People are going to pass this over. I kind of like Lawrence to Christian Kirk stacks. We're talking about the Washington gave up the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers last year, and the most quarterbacks, the most points to quarterbacks as well. So, like you said, Chase Young is out, which is really a pain. I will say on this thing too. What do you think of it? My path to defenses in DFS is to spend as little money as possible, no matter what. And Washington is coming off right now as the most popular defense at 2,500, and I think I'm gonna go that way in cash. But that really does kind of make me like this game a little bit more from the Jacksonville offense standpoint in GPPs. What's your quick thoughts on how to use a defense in DFS?
Yeah, we're in lockstep again. Generally speaking, I'm looking for kind of like the bottom third or bottom quarter of options in terms of price tag, and then really I'm just targeting situations where I believe that a turnover is more likely. Right, Washington did a pretty good job of creating turnovers last year, but if you look at even kind of middle of the road to mediocre defenses, if they're facing off against a backup quarterback, if they're facing off against a rookie in one of their first few starts, if there's a weather component, those are games where I'm happy to just punt at the position and hope that a ball squirts out and it becomes either 2 or potentially 8 points for my defense that I got on the cheap.
Yep. I'm with you there too. Especially there's so much variance in defenses, so especially in GPPs, right. I really don't mind going anywhere and just kind of having the hoping for those kind of freak turnovers and touchdowns. All right, awesome. So moving on, we're cover a couple more games, and then we'll kind of go rapid fire to get some of the top plays from the remaining games that maybe stand out. So Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, that's an interesting one that I think we're gonna find. Some popularity in. Anything stand out to you on this game?
Yeah, I mean, it should really be, full steam ahead for the pass catching options in Cincinnati. I don't think you can quite go double stacked with Higgins and Chase, but if you're trying to get different, that's maybe one way to do it. Definitely like having them out there with Joey Burrow, as a single stack option. On the Pittsburgh side, I'm really hoping that we see Deontay Johnson make his way into the game. You would see a lot of Eli Apple, and that is a matchup that I absolutely love attacking and will continue to do. He comes in at a pretty interesting price tag. He's right at a flat $6K, and I feel like those guys that are at the even $1,000 marks tend to go overlooked, right? People either kind of jump up a few $100 to like a Brandon Cooks or slide down to Darnell Mooney or Devonta Smith or Robert Woods for $5,600. So if Deontay goes, I do like his matchup. I do think that we'll see a little bit of that underneath work that was going mainly Najee Harris's way last year start to make its way back to Deontay Johnson in that favorable matchup.
Yeah, I agree. And just quick on the Bengals side, I really, really like Bengals stacks in this game. Just those Burrow, Chase, Higgins stacks were so much fun last year, and they, the fact that they've revamped their offensive line hopefully means for them that, Joe Burrow, who took 51 sacks last year, which was the highest in the league. I think that, against TJ Watt, that they could protect him even more. Those receivers are even better. Really, really like T. Higgins at 6,100 in this game. That is just too cheap for him. He is not the wide receiver 2. He's the 1A in that offense to Jamar Chase, and sometimes even the 1 with some of the underlying stats. So I'm really, really, really into this offense for GPP, and Higgins is currently my placeholder for cash if I can work him in with Marquis Brown and Michael Pittman.
Love it.
So, all right, moving right along here. We've got, all right, so I'll let you kind of go first on this one. I know I told us we'd go kind of back and forth here, but, you mentioned Lamar Jackson as the other quarterback option that you were looking at in place of Jalen Hurts. He is 7,300, only $500 more than Hurts. So I think you're in a position where if you have that money, you got a decision to make. So talk to us about Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, a lot of my interest in him does have to do with money, but specifically how that impacts his rostership. Right? You look at how the quarterback position is priced. Nobody's over 8K. A very short list of guys over 7.5. They're all kind of clustered in that 6.5 to 7.5 or 7.7 range, and right there, smack in the middle, is Lamar Jackson, 7.3K. I think most people, as they're building out their rosters in week number 1, they're either going to pay up to the more prolific games that are on the board in the Chargers with Herbert or in the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, or they're going to slide down a little bit, get the other side of that Chiefs game, go to a very favorable matchup for Jalen Hurts. So I think Lamar Jackson is going to be largely overlooked in what should be kind of a laugher of a game. And with that, he still is the center point of this offense, right? We talk about Marquis Brown, leaving Baltimore. I do think it'll take them a little bit of time to get adjusted to Rashad Bateman as the one, although Bateman himself is, again, criminally underpriced, right? He's coming in 5.1K, I think is the total, 5.3, excuse me. So there is a lot of value on the Baltimore side, and then specifically speaking to these kind of 10 or 20 max builds and the GPP side, I love pairing up Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews with just how much ownership I think Travis Kelsey is going to call. Mark Andrews coming in at $200 more in a less desirable game environment. I think he's going to be criminally overlooked. You could potentially get him as low as 5 or 6%. So to get those two high leverage pieces that are going to be the focal point of their offense for the team that is going to do the majority of the scoring in this overlooked game, I think it creates a really interesting leverage environment more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And just what you said about Kelsey before, about how he's going to be popular as the definite number 1. It's a terrible matchup for him. As bad a matchup as it is for Kelsey, it's an equally good one for Mark Andrews. The Jets were awful against tight ends last year. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points per game. So, I mean, if we get Andrews at significantly lower percent roster than Travis Kelsey, I'm all over that. I'm with you for sure. And I don't think in this one, if you're looking at GPPs, this is one instance I don't think you need a Jets bring back. I think the Ravens defense is in such a good position, especially now with, it looks like they lost Dwayne Brown, their left tackle, and they've got Flacco starting, who can't move. So this is kind of one that I really like a Lamar to Andrews stack, or a double stack of Lamar, Bateman, and Andrews, and play the Ravens defense as well, and just bring it back with no one. So one quick further thing on the Ravens that I kind of want to get your take on. Are you into Isaiah Likely at all? I was kind of scoffing at everybody that was, talking about how good he was, and when he started getting drafted, like while he was doing that whole thing in the preseason, like, oh, I got a Likely share, and now because look at what he's doing. I was like, all right, it's against second teamers, but I mean, he had such a dominant preseason, and it really looks like he's got a role. Is he a DFS play for you this week?
Certainly not. I mean, maybe there's a world where Baltimore gets up by such a significant amount that maybe he starts to get some snaps. Isaiah Likely is turning into a very nice NFL piece for the Ravens. I don't think that they were expecting to get a guy that is going to see as many snaps as he likely will in year one. But there really isn't a world where he's going to supplant not only Mark Andrews, but probably he's going to stay behind Nick Boyle for the better part of the year, right? So unless and until we get to a point where either of those guys are either working through or out with an injury, I don't think that there's really much to like for Lee in the DFS world.
Yeah, I would agree. And I don't, all of that dominance in the preseason came without Andrews on the field, and I like the story, but I think for fantasy and season longs, he's a nice little hold and wait and see, and if Andrews were ever to go down, then he's a really fun play, but I wouldn't overreact on him there. All right, awesome. So we're starting to run out of time here, but I want to touch on a couple of other games first that are offering a couple of key plays for DFS, and one, of course, is from a total fantasy perspective, fairly gross, but Carolina-Cleveland offers us Christian McCaffrey, who is healthy, and if you recall back to when he was at peak, 3 years ago, and doing what he was doing and not getting healthy, he was over 10,000, sometimes pushing 11,000, and rightfully so with his fantasy points per game. He's 8,500 this week. He is $600 cheaper than Jonathan Taylor. Is McCaffrey a core piece for you in cash? He certainly is for me, but I'm curious if you're with me on that one.
Yeah, absolutely, and you'll come to learn this about me as the season comes on. I am a sucker for value, to see a sub 9K price tag for a healthy Christian McCaffrey in a game where their wide receivers have absolutely horrendous matchups on the outside, so we should see even more target volume going his way. I will have a ton of Christian McCaffrey. This is our opportunity. He should be one of the more popular plays at the running back position in a cash context. Certainly nothing to worry about, right? If he comes in 15, 18%, you can still get different elsewhere in your lineup and get that nice foundation of scoring from a woefully underpriced CMC.
Yeah, I agree, and this is also just a case too. A lot of times we'll say, like, if a player is so chalky that he's like a cash play and he's a fade in GPPs, that is because you want to get leverage. I mean, I don't think you even need to do that there. I think you can go overweight on him in the GPPs if you're playing 20 of them, or if you're playing 20 entries and he's in 10, 12, even 14 of them. I think you're going to be fine, because the only thing that's going to stop him is health. If he plays this full game, has no sensitivity to game script like even Jonathan Taylor does. The Colts play from behind. You see a little more Nyheim Hines. It's all McCaffrey there. So I think you lock him in and you just go forward no matter what the contest you're in. Anybody else on the Panthers side? You mentioned the tough plays. Are you interested in DJ Moore at all?
No, not really. I mean, this Brown secondary is one of, if not the best unit in the entire NFL. So these guys on the outside are going to have a tough time. If you want to look to their slot play, that's the place where I think they'll be most effective. But even with that, it's a game environment that shouldn't be scoring very much. Probably going to be a pretty ugly game overall. So apart from CMC, I'm happy fading the rest of the Panthers.
Yep, I agree. I was a big DJ Moore fan coming into the season, but this is not the game for it. I don't think, play him in your season long, sure, but I think this is a DFS fade. All right, so we are coming to the end here. I want to just touch on a couple more players real quick, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the game featuring my New York Giants this week, facing off against the Tennessee Titans. I have one play in mind in this, and the Giant fan in me will go first here. So Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is $6,100, which again, he is like Christian McCaffrey again. There's never been a question of talent. His question Marks has been health and the inept coaching staff that has been handling him for the past 4 years. So at 6,100, I think he is 100% in play in all formats. The offensive line for the Giants, this might be the hopeful Giants fan in me saying this more, but the offensive line looks a lot better. One thing they did do in the preseason is block really well. They drafted Evan Neal. Andrew Thomas is a legitimately good left tackle. They beefed up their run blocking in the middle. It's one of the worst game environments on the slate, and the Giants are 5.5-point underdogs, which isn't a great game script for a running back, but I think that they are going to use him as the pass catcher a lot more than the other coaching staffs did. And at 6,100, I will have a lot of him. What about you there?
Yeah, I'll have a fair amount of exposure. I do think he'll be one of the more popular options, but much like you reiterated, when you get a guy like CMC, when you get a guy like Saquon Barkley, that is in an environment that they are fully healthy and they can do what we've known them to do historically, really hard to pass up on that. And then you add to that the optimism that Brian Daboll brings to the Meadowlands with him. I do think that they'll find unique ways to get him involved. A little bit worried about how popular he'll be. Happy to fire him up in cash. Might try to find actually some kind of sneaky Giants-Titans builds in larger field GPPs. And when I'm doing that, Saquon will certainly be part of that mix as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's and I'll be watching that game with pinning my fingers into the cushions here and just hoping that he does what he's supposed to be doing and doesn't get hurt again. So we are coming to the end of the show, but I don't want to go. We have one more question in the chat that I want to get, which is a good one on builds. So Robert again asks, on FanDuel, do you usually put a running back in the flex? And what about a flex on DraftKings? Running back also, or a wide receiver? So I tend, when I'm building cash, to do 3 running backs just because the touches are so much more predictable. I will say, though, that you can't pigeonhole yourself into making sure you do 3 running backs. If there is a 4th wide receiver that is such a good value that he makes your overall lineup better and is in such a good scenario, with injured players and a matchup and game script that really looks like his floor is higher, I'm okay with 4 wide receivers there. In general, for me, my cash games will look like 3 running backs, though. What about you?
Yeah, I think we're looking at it through a similar lens, right? The thing for me is I use it as kind of a tiebreaker, right? If I've got a couple of guys that are projected around a similar value output, I will err on the side of the running back, given that they are far more easy, far more clear to predict how their opportunity will convert into fantasy points.
Yep, awesome. So, Robert, we hope that answers your question. And we hope that you enjoyed this first edition of the DFS Diehards show with Jamie and Eric. We will be here every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Eric, anything before we go that you want to promote that's out there or coming up?
Everything that I might want to promote is all rolled up into my Twitter handle. That is at FantasyNav. Definitely appreciate everyone stopping by for this first week of the Football Diehards DFS show. As you're going back and rewatching either late at night or during your builds in the morning, drop some more comments. Jamie and I will be keeping our eyes on there, and we'll be happy to answer your questions if anything else crops up there. I've got a few new articles over at drroto.com, but again, those will be pinned to my feed over at FantasyNav.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at JAC3600. I have cash game article that comes out basically Wednesdays at Football Diehards, a GPP stack article on Fridays. Those were a day late this week as it kind of crept up on me that the week was actually here, which is odd after 8 months of waiting. But, make sure you tune in also to the Football Diehards are on SiriusXM NFL Radio right now. I'm actually jumping off here to go and join Bob and Mike to do a little DFS talk right after this. So if you want to hear more, and you got SiriusXM satellite, head on over there and listen to Bob and Mike. Eric, It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to doing this show with you every week, and we will see you next week.